I attended college, St. Andrews Presbyterian College in Laurinburg, North Carolina. Graduated with a degree in economics. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And Vietnam War was going on. I had the college deferments with the draft board, but not knowing what I wanted to do, I decided to enlist in the Navy. So I went to the Armed Forces Recruiting Entrance Station in Raleigh, North Carolina, which was close to college, and enrolled in the delayed enlistment program. It was like 3 months. That was in March of 1969. And I reported back in June of 1969 to Raleigh and took the train down to Orlando to start boot camp. I was in Company 136A from June until August when I graduated.
Did you take to the regimen of boot camp pretty easily?
You know, I was I 20? I was born in 46. I was 23 when I enlisted. But no, it didn't. I was, you know, one of the older recruits. But I got along. I didn't have any problem with anyone else. Mm-hmm. I started out as the RCPO.
Oh, now explain what that is for people.
The recruit chief petty officer, because I had graduated from military school. However, my cadence was not too great, so I was reduced to, demoted to first platoon leader, which was fine. I enjoyed that. Uh-huh. It gave me advantages, but yeah, I enjoyed classes. The chow wasn't bad. Some of the instructors were not very nice. They called us maggots and things like that, but I could take it.
And the Vietnam War was on right
Yes,
now.
it was.
Now,
and they were looking for volunteers, obviously, to go to Vietnam. That was another reason I enlisted. I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I wanted to join the Navy and see the world. Some of it, anyhow. You know, we were isolated. It was like being in college. We were isolated and immune from a lot of things. I mean, I remember the 1968 riots and the Democratic Convention in Chicago, but that was all on the news and in the newspaper. But we were able to get a TV on July 20th, 1969, for the moon landing. And we got to watch that. That was a thrill. But other than that, I don't think we had newspapers, any media. We didn't have time for that. We were sleeping, eating, marching on the grinder, and the heat from the grinder went right up through our boondockers. It was hot. A few of the guys passed out now and then.
Now explain to those watching what boondockers are.
Well, they were like it was a boot, sort of like a safari type boot.
Like high ankle.
Yeah, high ankle, right.
Work boot. Yeah.
Work boot. We called them boondockers. I'm not quite sure where that term came from.
Did you have any sense or trepidation about the deadliness of being during the war?
I was sort of oblivious. You know, we put in our dream sheet for where we wanted to go. Now, having been a college grad, I had the advantage of, I think it was sort of guaranteed an A school, a training class. And I ended up taking the test and I qualified as a radioman because I had taken typewriting in school, and a lot of vets benefited from being typist. But
yes, we hear that a lot. It got people out of the field. It got them into a cushier
jobs, right?
Yeah.
But I never had shore duty. It was all sea duty.
Mm-hmm. So right from boot camp, you went to your A school.
I went to Radioman Class A school, Class 6936A, at Bainbridge, Maryland, north of Baltimore, near Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And I was there from August of '69 until we graduated in December.
And what did you learn in that school?
Learned continuous wave, the Morse code, learned teletype,
I bet you
teletypewriter.
I bet you know that to this day.
No.
You don't?
We hardly ever used it after class.
I see.
Most of it at sea, on the 3 ships that I served on, was either voice, but primarily teletype. And I had taken statistics in college, and we had an introduction to teletype, which proved beneficial.
Mm-hmm. How long was your schooling?
Actually it was September to December. It was what, 8 weeks, 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we filled out our dream sheets, as we called them, for duty, whether it be sea or shore. I don't even remember what I had put down, but I got assigned to a LST, tank landing ship,
Mm-hmm.
USS Terrabon Parish, LST 1156. It was built at Bath, Maine, 1952.
And where was your duty station?
It was home ported at Little Creek, Virginia, near Norfolk.
Oh, okay.
And I reported aboard 1st of January, and we were underway in a week for the Caribbean.
Oh, wow. So you hit the fleet running.
That's right.
Now, I have to ask you this. What was it like when you first saw your ship? What was your impression?
I'm trying to think if I even, I didn't Google back then, did any research on what it was. I don't recall if I even knew what it was. Well, I knew it was an LST, and I may have looked it up somewhere. Mm-hmm. All I know, it was a ship, and I was heading down to Norfolk area.
And what's the size of an LST?
Oh boy, 150 crew. The exact dimensions I couldn't recall specifically for you.
They're like a football field.
About
long,
a football
right?
full length.
Yeah.
And it's flat bottom. There are rocks and rolls across the seas. And in rough weather, that's pretty obvious.
Oh, I bet.
And it bounces and rolls. And we embark battalion landing teams of Marines from Morehead City, North Carolina. They would be deployed with us to the Caribbean, Panama Canal Zone, and the Mediterranean. And they would stay on the port side of the ship, and we would stay on the starboard side of the ship, left and right. We had all of their equipment and tanks, trucks, vehicles, armory on the top deck, and we had a tank deck that also had, the bow doors of the LST opened, and a ramp went down, and all of their equipment could come on into the tank deck. So I spent a good bit of time in the Caribbean and in the Panama Canal Zone. Overall, I made 16 transits of the Panama Canal.
Wow, 16 transits.
On 2 ships. Actually, 3 ships, the 3 ships that I was on. But I enjoyed the Caribbean. Unfortunately, when I reported aboard, I was a radioman seaman, but I was assigned mess cook duties in the galley. So I had to go in and wash pots and pans and cut vegetables and this and that and clean out the grease pits. That was orientation for me.
And almost every sailor aboard ship has that duty at
Yes.
one time or another.
Yeah. And I got stuck with it in the hot Caribbean.
How was your crew? If you made friends
Oh,
aboard?
definitely. Yeah. Well, on the Terrabon Parish, my first of 3 ships, which I am the ship's historian for the association now. And we've had 12 reunions. Our 13th will be here in Pittsburgh in May of 2018. And I have maintained contact with one particular sailor, a fellow radioman. And now I've made friends with shipmates from all eras. from 1952 to 71. The Terrabon Parish was decommissioned October 29th of 1971 and transferred to Spain. And I was detailed to help train the Spanish radiomen for about a month before they headed home. That was a great experience. I had learned some Spanish in school, but we communicated pretty well.
So you worked in a place, I assume, called the Radio Shack?
Radio Shack.
The Radio Shack.
Was right opposite the captain's cabin.
Oh, you were that close to the
And we had evaporators, and we kept the sodas cold in there, and we sold them to the crew. So they didn't have any soda machine or couldn't get ice or anything.
And what was in the Radio Shack, for those who don't know?
Transmitters, receivers, telephones, teletypes, everything we needed to communicate. The ship's call sign was NLOU, and the task force was Y2ZX. The other ships in the task force, I don't recall their call signs. Mm-hmm. But then I was on the Terrabon Parish from, as I said, until decommissioning in October of 71. And after the Spanish left, I had time off, and then I was stationed on the USS York County, LST 1175, also at Little Creek. And I made several deployments with it to the Caribbean in the Panama Canal Zone. Went to the Azalea Festival in Wilmington, North Carolina. We never went to the we made a Mediterranean cruise on the Terrabon Parish, but none of the other ships.
So you went from one LST
to another LST.
Was that because you were already an LST crewman? Or?
I have no idea. I don't know. It was just fate.
After your first ship, did you want some other kind of ship other than an LST? Were you disappointed?
I don't think I gave it much thought.
You didn't?
No.
You didn't want to be on a big ship carrier? Or?
You mean a real ship? Instead of we were the LSTs were known to be large, slow targets. But I don't think that ever dawned on me. I just took whatever came. But interesting, again, when I was on the York County from it would have been, January of 1972 to July of 72, when it was decommissioned and transferred to Italy. And there again, I was detailed to help train the Italian radiomen before they headed back to Taranto, Italy.
Were the LSTs being phased out at that point?
Well, they were being replaced by a newer Newport class, the 1179 class. Actually, the Terrabon Parish 1156 was a class in itself. And it was an improvement over the World War II type LSTs. And then from the York County, after the Italian radioman left, I was assigned to a bigger amphibious assault ship, the USS Coronado, LPD-11, landing platform dock. And I served aboard her. I'd been promoted, advanced to radioman second class, and I served aboard her from August until I was separated from the Navy in February of 1973 due to a decreased in personnel strength, the winding down of the Vietnam War under President Nixon.
I remember the Coronado. I've seen that at sea.
Okay.
I remember that, yeah.
Well, it became a command ship, and actually its designation was changed from LPD-11 to AGF-11. It is no longer in service, but it was in service, I think, into the 80s, as you say.
Yeah, that really rings a bell. Yeah, the Coronado.
It was actually a flagship when I was on it.
And what was the crew size on that ship?
I'd have to look at the folder.
I was more than an LST.
Oh, definitely. Oh, probably triple it. Smaller than a carrier, but you could land a helicopter on it, and the stern was able to go down into the water, so the LCM craft, landing craft that the Marines would use, could come in and out of the well, as we called it.
Mm-hmm. So I can imagine that you served on the last of the LST fleets since World War II.
Well, I think, as I said, the Newport class 1179, it was an entirely different configuration. I don't know what they call them, but it had, I call them arms that went out from the bow. And it had bow doors, but then the ramp was raised and lowered from these supports. Unlike the LSTs that I served on, where the bow doors opened and the ramp went down to the water. We also carried causeways on the LSTs. They were like a roadbed, and we would carry two on each side, because a lot of times we couldn't beach. That's what the LSTs were designed for. If anyone has seen the D-Day landings, Normandy, many of the LSTs landed. Sometimes what they would do, the captain would put an anchor down from the stern and go in and beach, and the anchor, he could pull back if the anchor chain didn't break. But that did happen a few times.
Wow. And you did this beaching?
Oh yeah, and mostly in the Caribbean and Sardinia.
Huh.
And the Marines would go do their maneuvers.
Wow. Huh.
But
I always like to ask sailors what sea life was like. Did you like it? Because it's very regimented, like boot camp, very regimented, boring.
On the 1156, the USS Terrabon Parish, I slept in lower operations. Radio communications were assigned to the operations divisions. It was hot. We were 5 or 6 bunks high, canvas racks. Fortunately, I had a fan at the top, so that helped with some of the odors, because we all put our laundry in the same bag, properly stenciled for identification. But it was all right. The only thing about being a radioman was sometimes we called it port and starboard. You were either on duty, off duty for 8 hours or more sometimes. In port, we would stay, it would be 24 hours. But nobody likes seeing a sailor in his bunk during the daytime, when everybody else is up and at 'em and turning to, as they call it. So that was difficult to adjust to, because there were some real hard folks that just didn't like to see that. So they got us up. So we actually went back to work without any sleep.
When you were at sea, did you work 12 on, 12 off?
Sometimes. Yeah, well, generally, yeah, we would.
Right. Mm-hmm. What was it like to be out there on the ocean?
I enjoyed it. I did get seasick in the beginning, I think. I think I was in the radio shack at the time. I should have gone out, but I overcame that.
Mm. Did you learn any tricks from the old salts on how to overcome seasickness?
No.
No? You just waited it
adjusted to it. The chow wasn't too bad. I mean, we survived. I mean, we had room and board. You know, we weren't out in the elements, sleeping in a foxhole or a tent.
Yeah. I always like to, when I talk to people about being at sea, I mention how stunningly beautiful it can be in the middle of nowhere.
Saw some beautiful sunsets.
Beautiful sunrise, stars at night like you've never seen before. Yeah, amazing.
The dolphins swimming alongside.
Yeah.
Very seldom saw any other ships other than what was in our task force, obviously. But I don't remember any cruise ships or anything like that.
Yeah. And the water, clear and crystal blue in the Caribbean.
And the
Wow.
Mediterranean.
And the Mediterranean.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell us about being in the Mediterranean. Where did you go? What were your adventures? Now, you can keep it PG.
It took us 16 days to transit the Atlantic Ocean from Norfolk, Virginia to Rota, Spain. We were kind of behind. We had Thanksgiving dinner at sea. We arrived, our first port visit was Toulon, France. And at that time, we were able to do some traveling. I took 5 days of what we called basket leave and went with a group to Paris for 5 days for $80. That included room and board and everything. Spent Christmas in Barcelona, New Year's in Genoa, Italy, went to Athens, Naples, Villefranche, France. I love Villefranche. That was one of the nicest port visits. We anchored out.
Where's that, Villefranche?
Between Nice, Nice and Monaco.
Oh.
Beautiful little harbor.
Huh.
And I have been back since. But our sea daddy, Admiral Kidd, was aboard the USS Springfield there. I forget its hull number, but he hosted the Prince Rainier and Princess Grace Kelly aboard, and our captain was invited. And he said that was quite an evening, conversing with the prince and the princess.
Was there a sense among sailors, and maybe you ran into people who were in Vietnam, and then they were in the Atlantic Fleet and so forth, that you guys had it made, that you had some sort of special duty? Was there any sense of that?
Never had any contact
Never.
with them.
Really?
No.
It's a big Navy, right?
Right.
Yeah. I know a lot of people have said, during the war I was in Germany or I was in somewhere else other than Vietnam. Gee, I feel like, like I sort of cheated all that, and I feel badly for other guys who didn't.
I put my time in. I served my country. I volunteered. I enlisted. I took the officer's candidate test, but I just I don't do well on standardized tests like that. But it didn't bother me. I didn't mind being enlisted.
And what people sometimes forget is that even during Vietnam, we were still fighting the Cold War against the Soviets. And so those of us who were in the Atlantic, in the Mediterranean, we were up against the Russians, the Soviets.
So we served during the Cold War and the Vietnam war era.
Right. There was a whole front that the Navy was on against the Soviets that, it wasn't the hot war in the jungles, but it was, all intents and purposes, was very much a real thing.
Very much so.
You probably saw the Soviets.
Well, they were trailing us, the trawlers.
Yeah.
We remember we had a little scuttle hatch in the radio shack, and we would have it open for ventilation. It got pretty stuffy in there with all the hot equipment and the hot radio. Right. But we had them trailing us.
Yeah.
And in Panama, the Japanese Navy happened to be there because we saw their flag. They were having some kind of ceremony, and for some reason, the Terrabon Parish decided to blow its stacks. Why, I don't know, but it was sort of an embarrassment.
Now, explain what that is, blowing the stacks.
Well, the ship operates on diesel fuel, and I guess they periodically blow the stacks to clean them out, sort of like a chimney sweep at your house.
Right. And if you're wearing your white dress whites,
which the Japanese sailors were, they were manning the rail, as far as I can recall.
Huh.
Anyhow,
yeah,
pretty much the only two incidents that I can recall. Like I said, we had a good time. I really don't keep up with anybody on the other ships. I know there is a York County Association, but I've never been active with it because I'm pretty busy with the Terrabon Parish.
Right. And what did you want to do other than the Navy? What did you have plans to?
You mean when I left?
Yeah.
I was interested in the National Park Service. I had gone by the Interior Department one day and just inquiring about positions, but they had a brochure on seasonal employment, applying for summer jobs in the national parks. I was scheduled to be separated from the Navy in June of 1973. However, due to the decrease in personnel strength, I was separated in February. I submitted applications to superintendents of Western parks to be considered for employment as a seasonal in the summer of '73. I finally heard from Grand Canyon in June, and I started there on the North Rim in June of 1973, and I stayed there. I was a fee collector in the campground. That was my position. It shut down in the winter because they get 144 inches of snow from October on. I was able to go to the south rim of Grand Canyon and volunteer for the History Association. And I started giving geology talks at the Yavapai Museum, which overlooks the canyon. And then I got into interpretation, doing walks and talks as a seasonal. And I finally got my foot in the door as a park dispatcher for the ranger patrols. And that was a career conditional type position. And during the bicentennial in 1976, they were looking for to employ more personnel. So I became a park ranger on the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal in Sharpsburg, Maryland, near Hagerstown. And that was my career until I retired in June of 1998. I also worked at Longfellow's home. It's now called the Longfellow House, Washington's headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as a seasonal for the winter of '75.
And you volunteer here at the Heinz
Yes, I'm a
History
volunteer.
Center.
I've been a volunteer at the Heinz History Center since 2007. I started volunteering here in the library and archives, and now I'm in education. We developed a eyewitness to history U.S. military veteran experience class. We have veterans, thanks to Todd DiPastino and the Veterans Breakfast Club for giving us for resources. We recruited World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veterans. Complete a survey. They come to the History Center. We have a class. They observe. If they sort of pass, which they all do, they come and talk about their experiences to high school students. And we've been doing that since 2014. It's really been great. Met a lot of great veterans, and they enjoy it. In fact, we have a class tomorrow here for World War II, and we also have folks from the home front that remember growing up, and the scrap drives and the air raids and other things that they remember.
How neat. How neat. And do you share your story with people, kids?
No.
No?
No. I did at Mount Lebanon High School Veterans Day a couple of times. The juniors there, but they don't do that anymore. Well, I'm Vietnam era, but not Vietnam, so I think that tends to be more important. for the kids to learn about those experiences as opposed to those that served during the Cold War and Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to you personally to be a veteran?
Just the fact that I've served my country. I don't really expect any entitlements. I have no affiliation with the VA. My grandfather was a World War I veteran. He was the Adjutant of Alabama, and he was severely wounded during the Battle of Alsace in France. But his son was a captain in the Army. He was a B-29 pilot. But there's always been a sense of patriotism in the family to serve. My mother was a Red Cross ambulance driver during World War II in Washington, D.C. for Walter Reed Hospital. And she transported the actor Robert Taylor to the hospital to see the wounded, and also Jimmy Doolittle, the renowned pilot.
Right, the Tokyo raids.
Tokyo, definitely.
Boy, there must have been so many wounded people during that era at that hospital. Wow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But that's how I guess because of that, and my grandfather and uncle and some other cousins served, that I didn't, really even think about it. I had nothing to do. Why not serve my country,
And you're glad you did it.
Yeah. But I did things a little backwards. I went to college first, and then went in the service. But at that time, that's how it was.
Yeah.
I was fortunate I could go to college. But I'm glad I had that 3-year, 8-month service time.
And now you keep in touch with your fellow sailors through the association?
Through the Terrabon Parish, USS Terrabon Parish, LST 1156 Association.
And how did you get involved with that?
We were formed in 2002. Somehow, it may have been through whole number that someone was able to get names and addresses and made contact. So we formed in 2002. We have, maybe 150 members and associate members. We've had, I think I said, 12 reunions so far, and our 13th is here in 2018. But
and what do you do at your reunions?
They start on a Wednesday and end on a Saturday. We have a kickoff banquet or reception on the first night. Then we have tours scheduled, depending upon where we are. We haven't formalized the activity for Pittsburgh yet, but we have like 2 or 3 days of tours, and they're optional. And we have a business meeting the next to the last day. We have a banquet that night, and sometimes a tour the last day. So it's just a 3 or 4 day event. We last met in San Diego last September. But we've had reunions in Norfolk area twice, Houma Terrabon Parish, Louisiana, the namesake parish of the first ship, obviously the Terrabon Parish that we're talking about. We've met in San Antonio, Charleston, Savannah, Pensacola, Baltimore, the Great Lakes region. It's pretty much sums it up. Las Vegas, of all places.
Wow, you're keeping it alive.
Yeah,
keeping that memory alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
And thank you, Rick, so much for keeping your memories alive through our oral history project.
You're helping me remember too. Thank you.
Great, thank you.